Hi there. Hope you guys are staying healthy and safe in whatever part of the world you're in. Welcome to another episode of M&A Stories. In each of the M&A stories, we try to bring in a unique perspective from the professional world. In today's episode, we explored the M&A as a strategy from a business angle. Our guest today is a serial entrepreneur and a CEO. So let's see what our CEO has to say about M&A as a strategy. So ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Dirk Hendrickx. So welcome, Dirk.
Thank you. I look forward to this.
Wonderful. So, Dirk, let's start with a brief introduction.
So my name is Dirk Hendrickx. I'm Dutch originally, have a background in consumer goods, sales and marketing, and then very much a commercial focus. And for the last 8 years, I'm a managing director, CEO of two different firms. One is a manufacturing company. The other, which I am at the moment, is a services company. International footprint, both of those. And in both instances, mergers and acquisitions play an important part of our growth strategy. The key focus that I actually bring is the integration part of it, because that is where you actually where you achieve the value or not of the price that you pay. And it's actually very interesting because in the last 2 weeks, I have been speaking to a number of companies, a lot of venture capitalist companies and net high worth family offices. And it is very clearly what I see from them is that rather than talking about mergers and acquisitions from a financial perspective, they are now more and more looking at people that might not be qualified as a financial expert or as an accountant, but actually brings the skills around integration. And I think what I have seen during the last 8 years in the 6 integrations that I have been involved in is how earlier on in the process, even before the due diligence, you already start to think about the integration, the better chance of success that you will have. So I hope I can share some of those experiences and that it is of interest to other people.
Absolutely. That's wonderful to hear. And in fact, what we're looking at today is that lens, that leadership lens. Now, you and I, we have already spoken about this in our previous conversation. Why is M&A considered to be such an important strategy for any business? Why do business leaders consider it as an important strategy tool?
First of all, it is never the only part of a strategy. So in both of the organizations, when you want to grow organically and acquisitions. The reasons that I have been active in acquisitions is because of it can accelerate growth. Yeah, it can help you to have a lower risk of entering particularly into a new country. And it can help you to acquire talent that otherwise would be very difficult to find in the market. It really helps to cement an overall growth strategy rather than that it is purely something on its own. And I think if you, in a phase of where a market is maturing or in a phase where the market is developing very fast and very segmented, you have a lot of entrepreneurs, founders that come up with technology, that come up with new products. And the only way that you can actually acquire that and bring it into your portfolio is through an acquisition. In that perspective, timing is everything.
Yes, definitely. So one thing we've seen is studies show that a lot of M&A integration does not end up creating value. So just curious to know, or struggle to create value. Why do you think that may be?
Good question. I think in my experience, and again, I can only talk about the experiences I have. The first thing is of why the acquisition was done in the first place. Let me think of an example. There was a company I acquired, and the reason we acquired that company is because we had capital that we could give to that company in order to win bigger projects. They didn't have the cash flow themselves. You needed to have a lot of working capital because you needed to pre-finance, if you won a bigger project. And then during the integration, we got a lot of focus on IT systems and how they could integrate, where actually we should have completely forgotten about that and purely focused on how can we support the management and the leadership team of the company we acquired on what does it take to win bigger opportunities. We went off a little bit to the side before coming back to what we actually wanted to achieve, but there wasn't the right focus. And that is a key lesson that I take with me towards the future. I think the other key reason is around personalities and people. The culture between companies, the mentality, it doesn't necessarily mean that people from the company you acquire can work together with the company that is the one that does the acquisition. And part of that is the DNA of each company. Part of that is actually how is the whole acquisition positioned within both organizations. And I have seen in a number of cases where even subtleties in the way things are communicated can have a lot of impact or a lot of delay on how well an integration can take place. Yeah. For instance, we are acquiring this company because they really are very good in e-commerce and something else. And all of a sudden, the people in the company that did the acquisition are upset because they feel undermined. But we have done that for 20 years. No one actually really told us that it was done. And all of a sudden, the whole balance and is gone because the people in the company that did the acquisition became very defensive, and therefore people don't work together. So a lot of attention I pay, and more so, on being very balanced in how you position it and make sure that both the company that is acquired as well as the people that work for my organization are part of the journey, but that it is not confrontational, but very much a journey together. Does that answer your question?
Yes, those are some great lessons that you shared with us as well, those lessons learned. Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. I think some of the challenges and examples that you shared are so very pertinent. Let's explore a bit around some of the journeys that business leaders like you have to take into consideration in order to get the, let's say, the right fit, culturally, leadership, and otherwise. How do you go about ensuring that the company that you're acquiring is a right fit? From that perspective?
I think the key stage starts before you even get into due diligence. And what is the conversation that you're having at that time? You talk to the people of the company that you are looking for to acquire and ask them what is for them the value of being integrated as part of my organization. How do they see that as a growth opportunity? What do they expect? What do they think they can bring to the table? And very quickly, you already start to get a feeling whether this is a founder who sits around the table say, yes, thank you for your money, but I would like to continue on my own on what I have been doing. And much earlier on now, I would disregard those opportunities. Whereas if you have a different conversation, people actually work on making a plan together, putting a rough framework without being too much in detail, but at least the mindset is there that there needs to be win-win. I think the second element is during the due diligence process. And then particularly, I focus here on the operational due diligence. I'm going more and more into detail in understanding the processes, but also what people do not know of the company that acquires them. So let me think of an example. I managed a manufacturing business and we acquired a distribution business. And even that simple differentiation actually means that a lot of the people in the distribution business don't know what they don't know about being part of a manufacturing organization. Yeah? And that is not a big deal in itself, but it is part now on any integration plan that I put together. Yeah? That they come to a manufacturing, that they see that they understand how it works, but also how that impacts their work and where it is different from working in a distribution business. So those would be key examples of how I'm more and more earlier on in the process, try to make sure that the integration can be a success.
That's a great insight from that perspective. Now, I'm sure our audience would be quite keen to actually visualize how that thing goes about, right? So let's explore a bit more about some of the conversations that you have at this stage, prior to the due diligence. This is where I'm assuming a lot of hesitation would come in from the target company because, should we release the details? Should we be careful about, secrecy or competitiveness or whatever? What's the conversation like at that stage?
No, it is far more generic than that. It actually is me in my head, knowing my own organization, knowing how we work and the idiosyncrasies in that, and listening to how people interact in a management team meeting, or how the people work with their colleagues, and the stories that you hear. Yeah, so it is far more the softer side of things that you pick up by reading in between the lines than that you're actually fact checking. Yeah, but you need to be very sensitive for, hey, that is a very different style or a very different approach of how my company works and operates. If you acquire the company because you want to get the product and you're less interested in the people, then that obviously is of lesser concern. But if you want to go for a complete integration, and that is as much a challenge for the company that you acquire as for the company, as for my own company, because once you're integrated, it is the mixture of the two. Yeah, and it is not the company, so my company that does the acquisition, that actually can impose the way of working, because that is not how people function. And you need to be very considerate. And if anything, I will do more training earlier on, and I will involve more people than what you would say within the exact scope would be really necessary, which I've done in some of the earlier acquisitions and integrations I did.
Awesome. So I heard you mentioning the importance of, you understand how your organization works super well, the nuances, the idiosyncrasies, these subtle things, you really understand that well. And then I also heard you saying that if the acquisition is, in large part because you want these individuals, not simply the product, that people element is incredibly important. So with that in mind, you started touching on this. What would your approach be from a culture integration perspective? Sort of what would be the key things that you would consider as you look to bring on this new organization and you want to integrate the two cultures together?
I think there are different levels in that. If you start at the senior leadership team, let them start to get them to know each other. And let's make absolutely in an open conversations, have lunches, have dinners, so that people actually get a sense for who the other people are. And my approach thereby is expect the unexpected, both for the management team of the company we acquire, as well as for my own management team. Don't expect that they work in the same way than what you are used to working. Some of the challenges there that I have had are actually language challenges. When I bought a number of companies in France, and the management of all of those three companies didn't speak very good English. So that already is a challenge in itself. Yeah. And you need to spend a lot of time lowering the barriers in how people can be defensive or feel uncomfortable in expressing. I think one of the key challenges, and that I am very much aware of, is that when you're a founder owner of a business working for a bigger for another organization, it's not about bigger, it is the fact that you're no longer your own boss is a big challenge.
Yeah, that is a huge shift from you are, leading the organization and focusing on maybe product market fit and versus, the focus of a much larger organization. Anirvan, I know you've talked about this in your course as well, sort of the organization going through this growth curve or this maturation over time. And so the startup is maybe over here and the, older, more established organization is maybe a little bit further down that curve, and their focuses are extremely different. And so that can, I would imagine, could be quite an adjustment to have to make.
That takes time and you need to be patient.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, even the most agile person that is open for this kind of change is flabbergasted what is coming at him or her. And you need to be extremely respectful of that. You need to celebrate the progress before you achieve the end goal. And you probably will never achieve that as it would be in an ideal world.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to acknowledge and celebrate the progress as you move along the integration as well as the pre-deal stages. Now, when you look at the strategy world, right, world of business strategies, you see different frameworks. People use Porter's Five Forces or McKinsey's 7S. There are various methods and models that are used. Now, our experience has been that when it comes to integration, there is hardly any methodology or any standard approaches that are used. So for example, we talk about Haskell/Jameson in order to ascertain the depth of an integration, as we spoke the other day, or Griner's curve, or Griner's growth model that Marcella just mentioned. But most of the organizations we don't see, and specifically when it comes to organizations looking at the people and the cultural aspects, right? And there's so many different variations of how you manage and measure culture and integrate culture, right? We didn't get a chance, but Marcella comes from an HR background. So there is a strong people and cultural aspect that she always tries to dig in. So what would be some of the pitfalls, some of the challenges, some of the hurdles that you would say, in addition to some of the challenges that you've already mentioned from a people and a leadership perspective?
I think the major pitfall is if you underestimate it. I'm a little bit hesitating to find a good example on how to bring this to life. Culture and approach is something that is rarely discussed as part of the acquisition process. Yeah, and it is something that you look at so many other elements. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that particular element is not brought in. And yes, from an HR perspective, you look at all the contracts, you look at any risks there and but you don't really talk about how people work together because we assume that will work one way or another. Yeah, and it is, if anything, in all the integrations that I did, this is by far the most important element to make it work. And you're right, there isn't a model. I'm not aware on a model. And it is a lot picking it out as an area as a separate work stream as part of the integration. But it is a lot of training, training on tools, training on having people to work together in teams, training on what is the vision of the combined entity. Yeah, and that is not so much a training, but more that you're facilitated with the combined management team in order to define that vision, where each individual feels free to express their view, but have respect for the views of others. And already that can be quite a big change, particularly if you acquire a business and some of those businesses can be quite hierarchical in their sense because you have a founder owner, very strong personality, has people that follow that. And then they come into a different framework. And you need to make that as part of your risk assessment when you do that. Let me think of one example. We acquired a company and a very strong leader, but uncoachable. And it was his way or the highway. But if he liked you, he would follow you or he would get your input. So ultimately, the approach that I found was very clearly observing who he liked to work with, see whether that person was aligned with some of the objectives that I had, and then bring that person forward, promote that person in order to get a step in how we could create value out of this particular acquisition. But that is a very, that was really trying to adjust after the acquisition was done. I now feel that I have better tools to deal with that. But I would never been able to, in that particular instance, to have seen that up front. I didn't think that could have been an issue, and it definitely was.
Those are excellent examples. Thanks for sharing those. In fact, these examples are what make these interview sessions so interesting. So thanks for sharing that. Now, I would like to spend one more minute on this particular topic, and then I know Marcella has a set of questions. When it comes to leadership, and you mentioned leadership culture, the reality is majority of the people don't know about the existence of these tools, but there are some fantastic tools that could be used very easily. So, for example, you mentioned about the hierarchical versus market-centric versus meritocratic organizations. There's a framework called Completeness Values Framework, which is by Cameron Quinn. Then there's another one, which is Organizational Leadership and Culture by Edgar Schein. Gives a very, very good perspective. So, and then there is Richard Barrett's Organizational Culture. So there are quite a few examples. I'll be more than happy to share them with you.
I loved the examples that you gave, right? When how you were flexible and you adjusted, and then you came up with the approach for how that you could really extract the most out of the situation, or, to achieve the outcomes that you wanted, right? To work with someone who maybe was working in a way that was very different than what you expected. I actually think sometimes having discussions sort of like to align on, well, how do we want the two organizations to work together? And our organization tends to make decisions in this way. How does your organization make them? And okay, in our future state, are we going to sort of combine these two? Are we going to come up with a new way that we do things? Or do you guys want to adopt our way? And how can we enable that? And how can we, achieve success together, right? So just kind of like that aligning on how we want to actually work together. And I think, Dirk, your points earlier on languages and, the culture maybe from your country, sort of all of these things are coming into play here. And with every acquisition, they will be different. But just taking that time to align, I think could be incredibly helpful. And then at least people are on the same page with respect to, yes, this is the way that we want to work together. This is how we want to make decisions. This is how we want to evaluate risks. We're sort of all trying to march in the same direction.
I can only build on that, Marcella, because I think as a person, I feel far more comfortable now to have those conversations than 8 or 10 years ago. I went on a learning journey myself on how important it is to have these conversations, and that they're actually a key part of making an integration successful. And that by having those conversations, you make people aware of the fact that every company operates different, and that is absolutely fine. That is a neutral statement in itself. Be aware of how your own organization operates versus how another organization. And actually, that is one of the key reasons as part of a growth strategy, acquisitions can help, because it can help as part of the business transformation, where you can accelerate changes by having an acquisition. And if you grow as a company, the way that you operate internally needs to evolve. A 15 million or 30 million or 75 million or 100 million organization doesn't work in the same way. So one of the reasons that I'm now trying to use acquisitions as well is actually to evolve the internal way of working of the two organizations. And the way that you describe is a great tool to actually facilitate that change and use the acquisition to. So I can only second that. Sorry for the long-winded confirmation that I thought you were absolutely spot on.
No worries. And in fact, you may have had a different hairstyle if you'd got to know 10 years back. Some of the tools and techniques,
Not really.
right?
No. I've had this for quite a while already. already.
Funny. So I guess thank you, Dirk. I loved hearing everything you've shared. And so thinking about capability development, which is I think where Anirvan was leading us, as you're sort of looking at the two organizations or taking a step back and trying to harness the capabilities of the two organizations and trying to, achieve that desired outcome, any, reflections, tips, suggestions on how one should go about approaching that?
Yeah, as wide as possible. Yeah, involve even people that are not directly involved in the acquisition. I think that is the key learning for me. Yeah, because even if you make an acquisition in France, full integration there, or you make an acquisition in the Netherlands or in Germany, and it might not impact your UK business, guess what? It does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so make sure that people are aware, yeah, and that they are part of that journey. And that they feel, so when you do a training, if it is, for instance, because you brought the new organization onto a tool, an IT tool, let people in the UK business be part of that. The key challenge here is always people are busy.
Right.
Yeah. So you need to, and I'm doing that quite deliberately now. I'm over investing during this part of the integration in getting temporary resources in, or getting support for the people that then can help with the integration. It's a great learning opportunity for them. It is a great engagement booster. But you need to make sure that you give them the space and the time that they can actually do it, because any acquisition, both for the acquired company as well as for the company that is acquired, is a stressor. I can't, my experience is that you can't overestimate or underestimate. I'm not even sure what is the right word here, but I think you get the feeling. People, it is a change, even if it doesn't impact you directly. Yeah, because there are new people, there are different ways of working, and this is throughout the whole organization. And you need to actively, one, acknowledge it, and two, manage it.
Yes. Lots of change management. Awesome. Thank you.
It's also fun.
You said it's also fun?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's an exciting time. To your point, it's like, it can be extremely stressful, right? Because especially for individuals on the side of the target organization, because they are coming into this new organization, they have a change of employer. They may have a change in their benefits. They may have a change in their employment terms. Who knows? Lots of sort of changes going on, but it's also an exciting time too. So I think the way you manage that, communicating the vision of the two organizations together and how individuals fit into that bigger vision could potentially be incredibly helpful for this time where there's just, could be a lot of uncertainty for some individuals.
Yeah. And to build on that, through my experiences, I actually think that people are far more open to change than what people often get credit for. Yeah, the saying is people don't like change. Well, I have a different view. Yeah, most people are actually quite driven, and they want to change, they want to evolve, they want to learn. Yeah, it is not so much that people don't want to change, it is more channeling that into more or less the same direction.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think there is a lot of positive from both organizations if you integrate them to drive that, but you need to channel it. I think that is, I'm probably now better at it than earlier on in my career.
Mm-hmm. You need to channel it. I like that. I'm taking that as my takeaway. So moving to our next question, thinking about, you've had such a great career and, you've shared with us, thank you for all the lessons you've shared across all of the M&A integrations you've been a part of. As you sort of look ahead to the future and you think about what that could look like, Would love to hear your thoughts on, where you think future trends in M&A might be evolving to. Anything you think about the future?
I think that if you see how the workplace is developing, if you see how technology is taking over more and more of the benign tasks that we do, integrations, if anything, will become more and more about people. So how to manage the cultural integration, how to manage acceptance between the two organizations from the people perspective, and having them to work together becomes, I think, a more important part of acquisitions than, this is a product, we now put it in our catalog and it is now in our warehouse. So, and particularly in industries that are developing, where there is a lot of innovation happening, that are still very fragmented. You see a lot of bolt-on acquisitions, but they are more and more about people and knowledge than about assets. And I expect that will continue. So the importance of the cultural integration becomes more and more important.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Brilliant. And I think this kind of brings us to the end of the session. But before we go, any last tips or final thoughts before we wrap up the session today?
I started my view, and maybe it's also then good with the sandwich method to end with that, is that the integration starts very early on in the acquisition. And that is not a financial exercise. It is very much a people exercise. Yes, you can structure a deal that a founder joins the business and that a big part or some part of the value that you pay is paid on the achievement of certain objectives. The mindset of the founder will change. And you have to acknowledge that, because if they all of a sudden sit on a lot of money, the fact that there is a little bit more money at the end of the tunnel, but it is not their business anymore, has a change in mindset. And the earlier on you can, and this is just an example, and there are other examples, but I think the earlier you acknowledge that and the earlier you take that as part of the whole acquisition process, the more effective you will be at creating the value in the end.
That's a fantastic way to end the session. And in fact, this is where so many organizations get it wrong. I mean, many organizations, many business leaders for that matter, think M&A as a financial instrument, a financial structuring, and that's it. But there is so much more, and real value actually gets created when you involve people, leadership, and culture. Those are awesome final thoughts. Those examples that you shared and crystal clear ideas of what people should be doing are a great way to wrap up the session. But before we go, there are some people in our audience who may want to continue the dialogue with you. What's the best way to keep in touch?
I look very much forward to that, because I'm very keen to hear their experiences. So the best way to be in touch is via LinkedIn. If you look at Dirk Hendrickx, my profile is on LinkedIn. And so please do reach out and let's continue the conversation.
Dirk, thank you so much. It was incredible to hear your stories. Thanks for everything you shared, all of the lessons. I really learned a lot today. I'm sure everyone listening did as well. So thank you so much. We really appreciate and value your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. I really appreciated the opportunity to chat with Dirk. I learned so much, as I mentioned, and for all of our listeners out there. And if you liked what you heard, please give us a thumbs up, give us a like. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel or to our 8 different podcast channels as well. Thanks so much. Hope to hear you next time.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you guys again in the next episode. Till then, take care, stay healthy, and stay safe. Bye-bye.